On November 30, 2025, NASA unveiled a fresh Hubble photograph of 3 Atlas, and the entity that people had been claiming for months was merely a comet is currently exhibiting behavior that comets simply don't display. At the image's center lies a compact, concentrated nucleus. Surrounding it, a 60,000 kilometers anti-tail aimed directly at the Sun, and beneath enhancement filters, 2 separate jets shoot outward from opposing sides of the core. But here's what nobody can ignore. That configuration, that geometric pattern, that precise anti-tail corresponds exactly to what Professor Avio forecasted in a research paper published prior to the image being captured. Not approximately, not somewhat similar, but exact. In the meantime, several hundred million kilometers distant, ESA's JUICE spacecraft photographed the identical object from an entirely different vantage point, and JUICE observed phenomena Hubble wasn't able to. Plasma division, layered, dust movement, and active outgassing reaching well beyond Hubble's magnified field. If you've been tracking the contradictions around 3 Atlas and since, like the official natural comet, narrative keeps becoming weaker and weaker, you're not delusional. Hit subscribe and smash that like button because the information that recently emerged is the most obvious contradiction to date. When Hubble focused on 3I Atlas on November 30th, the entity was approximately 286 million km from our planet, around a month following perihelion, the moment when comets typically disintegrate. Following a near pass by the Sun, a natural comet ought to appear disorganized. Surface cracks, stretched cores, fragment halos, erratic jets. Everything regarding perihelion drives a nucleus toward disorder. But the fresh Hubble photograph reveals the contrary. The nucleus is defined and compact. No stretching, no cracks, no debris patterns drifting off-center. If internal fissures were present, Hubble's F35OLP filter on the WFC3 camera would have detected them right away. Instead, the nucleus remains stable while the encompassing glow radiates outward as a uniform, flawlessly symmetric aureole nearly 40,000 kilometers across. For an entity just emerging from the most extreme heating stage of its trajectory, that degree of steadiness is abnormal. Natural comets oscillate. They break apart, they deteriorate inconsistently. 3 Atlas is tranquil at its center, while everything surrounding it keeps expanding, and that's what renders this photograph so significant. It's not displaying what comets exhibit after perihelion, it's displaying something maintaining cohesion far superior to what the models forecast. But Hubble only observed the central zone. ESA's JUICE spacecraft, though recorded a considerably broader perspective. JUICE wasn't even utilizing a scientific imager, merely a navigation camera designed for positioning. Still, the image unveiled 2 formations that don't correspond to Hubble's symmetry whatsoever. The first is a thin streak extending away from the core. That's ionized plasma being driven straight by the solar wind. The second is a wider, denser dust layer positioned differently and traveling more gradually. When plasma and dust diverge in a single image, there's only one interpretation. The entity is expelling fresh matter at this moment. Ionized gas streams straight backward under solar wind force. Dust trails behind and disperses differently. Both tails in the identical image signifies continuous activity, not an aged trail, not residual debris, but an active engagement between the entity and the Sun. 2 probes, 2 perspectives, 1 narrative. Steadiness internally, movement externally. Then the enhanced analysis transformed everything once more. Process the Hubble exposure using an unsharp mask, and the flawless symmetry collapses. There's inclination, deformation, delicate asymmetry. Implement a Larson filter engineered to expose rotational gradients in the internal coma, and a concealed formation materializes into sight. 2 jets burst from the nucleus in opposing trajectories. One launches sunward, the other launches away, creating a precise anti-tails are exceptionally uncommon. Dust is not expected to align straight toward the Sun unless the entity is rotating in a locked, steady manner and ejecting matter in a foreseeable configuration. In other terms, the filter reveals the fundamental mechanism powering the activity, whatever that mechanism might be. And now arrives the instant that elevates this beyond merely an abnormal comet photograph. Prior to November 30th, before NASA captured this picture, before anyone witnessed this geometry, Avi Loeb released a research paper forecasting precisely what Hubble would display. He constructed a scenario where 3E Atlas expelled a cloud of tiny fragments near perihelion, particles affected by non-gravitational influences. His computations demonstrated that by late November, these fragments would migrate sunward, creating a luminous 60,000 kilometers antitail in a teardrop configuration. The fresh Hubble photograph corresponds to his forecast flawlessly. Identical length, identical configuration, identical placement relative to the Sun. This isn't vague similarity. This is forecasting precision. Loeb composed the model. NASA captured the photograph and the universe rendered the precise configuration he outlined. Natural outgassing doesn't generate mathematically exact behavior. Sublimation is disorderly by nature. If Atlas were venting haphazardly, Hubble ought to have witnessed unpredictable irregular jets. Instead, the information adheres to a configuration that Low outlined before it occurred. That degree of exactness is not what you anticipate from a tumbling ice sphere. It's what you anticipate when the influences involved are oriented, uniform, and controlled by something more steady than sublimation. Then the chemical composition enters the equation. Spectroscopy discloses a nickel to iron proportion around 10m1 in the metallic component, a figure nearer to manufactured alloys than standard comet makeup. Comets originate beyond the frost boundary where heavy metals don't gather. They are predominantly water ice, carbon materials, and silicate dust. If you identify prominent nickel or cobalt markers, something is incorrect with the classification. Atlas displays metallic concentration and abnormally minimal water content, approximately 4%. Natural comets span between 70% and 80% water ice. Atlas is excessively arid to function like a comet and excessively metal abundant to match the category whatsoever. Include the profoundly negative optical polarization, rare, even among unusual comet entities, and the chemical signature begins to resemble something wholly separate. Then there's the power dilemma. Jets spreading millions of kiln demand mass output well beyond what a nucleus of Atlas's calculated dimensions could maintain. To fuel that kind of steady outflow with conventional physics, the nucleus would require losing matter at devastating rates. But Hubble displays a steady nucleus. No disintegration, no fragmentation, no mass shortage. X-ray observations complicate it additionally. Comets only generate X-rays when substantial quantities of gas engage with the solar wind. But Atlas is arid. Minimal water, minimal volatiles, yet powerful X-ray markers. The power calculation doesn't balance. Then the trajectory, non-gravitational acceleration figures documented earlier in the year reveal velocity modifications that can't be justified by observable mass loss. A comet must expel substantial quantities of gas to propel itself. Atlas displays acceleration without expelling the necessary mass. The orbital path raises additional questions. Several close passes with Mars, Venus, and Jupiter along an exceptionally neat arrangement. An approach along the ecliptic surface rare for interstellar entities. A projected source zone matching the coordinates of the renowned WOW signal. Coincidence? Perhaps, perhaps not. NASA guaranteed that the complete Hubble information package, including ultraviolet spectroscopy, will release soon. UV is the solution to interpreting the actual chemistry. If the spectra display abnormal isotopic proportions, elemental combinations, or substances unknown in natural comets, the story shifts forever. JUICE's forthcoming passes might disclose whether the antitail holds large solid fragments rather than dust. If it does, loose perihelion fragment theory becomes verifiable. Visibility ought to decline around December 19th, when the geometry changes, then increase once more near the Jupiter pass in March 2026. If the forecasts correspond to the witnessed behavior, the argument becomes more compelling. Piece by piece, the proof is accumulating. X-ray production, metallic makeup, forecasting, modeling, plasma, and dust division, locked, spinning, antitail geometry, non-gravitational acceleration, power outputs well beyond standard sublimation. Each irregularity individually has justifications, but collectively they create a configuration that doesn't settle neatly into merely a comet. We might be observing unusual chemistry, a fragmented planetary piece, a variety of interstellar entity we've never categorized, or something further beyond the conventional. Something that compels us to revise the conventional entirely. So, here's the inquiry. With the Hubble information, the JUICE verification, and Loeb's forecast matching flawlessly, do you still believe 3E Atlas is a comet? Drop your hypothesis below. Subscribe so you don't miss the UV spectroscopy release, and share this with someone who requires to witness the information, because the subsequent release might alter everything.